Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. But before we do, I want to wish each and every one of you guys a healthy, happy and prosperous 2023, filled with God's blessings, and may you make the most incredible memories of your lives. And talking about funny memories, about 4 or 5 years ago, I received a gift on New Year's Eve. It was a late Christmas present from a friend of my father. She was an elderly lady, a widow who had children who lived far away, and my dad works construction, so when he painted and decorated her house, they sort of became friends. And because everybody lived so far away, her immediate relatives, and she had some mobility issues, if she needed to go to the shops or something, he would go and pick her up and take her to the supermarket, or sometimes he would just go around and have a cup of tea, and they sort of hit it off. And she bought me a Christmas present one year, this particular jumper, and I'm always a little bit uneasy about receiving presents. I'm great at giving presents. I love to see the joy on people's faces, but to receive them, I always feel a little bit awkward. So I decided to ring her and thank her for the particular gift. And she says, "Oh, no, you need to take a selfie. I want to see you trying it on. You need to model it for me. I want to see how it looks." So away I go and I take this selfie that you can see here and I send it to her. And with the most concerned sound in her voice, she just replies and says, "Oh no, you look like the head of a penis popping out the foreskin." And I've never worn it again. So I hope you guys make some wonderful memories on this New Year's Eve, but not as traumatic as that one. These oldies, man, they got no filter. She just cooked me without a moment's hesitation. And moving from the hilarious to the sad, that is the passing of Pele. Perhaps the greatest footballer of all time, certainly on paper. 3 World Cups, the achievements this man had are just absolutely incredible. The first Christmas present I ever remember receiving was from my dad. It was a football video called The Boys from Brazil. It would observe the story of the Brazilian national team in the World Cup. And so there were so many wonderful footballers that were on display. Rivellino, Tostão, Carlos Alberto, Zico, Jairzinho, the list was endless. But the diamond in the box of gems was Pele. His inception, his intelligence, the things that he would try to do, and you as a kid, inspired by the joy this man brought, would try to emulate on a football field. He inspired more than just a generation. And he has passed away, and of course, death is part of life, but it's always a sad thing. And the reason I bring this up is because in the past I've done a video talking about great fighters and talking about fighters not being invincible, that age does catch up with them. And a lot of people will be instantly shouting you down for that. They don't want to believe it. They almost want to believe in the immortality of a human being. But no matter the heights you reach, no matter the point you get to, the only undisputed, undefeated fighter is Father Time, something that I've always said on this channel. And I spoke about this Orthodox Christian icon. And a lot of you messaged me about that particular icon at the time, and you wanted to see it, and I didn't have a photo of it or anything like that. But I got so many messages. Well, I've managed to track it down. And it sort of applies to this here as we go into 2023. So before we get into the hardcore boxing stuff, let's just quickly observe this. On the left is the icon that I'm talking about. You see this young boy being born, and he's got the world ahead of him. He lives an idyllic life. He's not concerned about the greater meaning of life or of virtue. And as he becomes a young teen, he starts to have dreams. He starts to think about being greater than what he currently is. And as he becomes a young adult, he starts to look suave and slick. He's got his lovely silk red cloak on. He's interested in the attention of women. And eventually, after doing all of that and acquiring a really good job and building, he becomes the king at the top of his own domain. He is top of the world, peak of his powers in life. He's not concerned about the meaning of life. Just as he turns over through that peak of life, he's still in a great moment in his life, but the old bones are starting to creak. Eventually, as he passes the autumn of his life, you can see the seasons there in the inner wheel: spring, summer, autumn. Just as he's about to enter winter, he's an old man. Now he starts to think about the things that really do matter in life. But perhaps sometimes it can be a little bit too late. As he goes deep into the winter of his life, you can see that death is there awaiting. And now obviously this is an Orthodox Christian icon, so this is looking at it from the perspective of getting your soul right with God. And on the right you see another icon, the ladder towards heaven. You ascend towards life and you can see all these demons, these devils, passions, whether it's lust or greed or wrath or whatever else it might be, and they're dragging you off of that ladder towards life to drag you down towards hell. Now obviously, like I said, this is a religious message, but the point is, in life you don't always take into account what is truly important. So leave a legacy behind, not just one of great achievement, but one where you made the lives of those around you better. Go away and think about the grander meaning of life. Be the best you can be as a human being. Because for all that the great Pele achieved, one of the things that a lot of people say about him is that he was a wonderful man away from the sport. He was a guy that, yes, he left an incredible legacy in terms of his craft, but additionally to that, he made the lives of people better. And so you can be the best that you can be and be a unique individual in the world and still bring goodness to the world. And it reminds me to leave you with a final quote from Pele. People always ask me, when is the new Pele going to be born? Never. My father and mother have closed the factory. Indeed, he was one of a kind. Edson Arantes do Nascimento Pele, rest in peace. Moving on from that, let's talk about Tank Davis. Allegations were made by Tank's girlfriend that he attacked her and she was worried for her life in a frantic call to 911. She has since retracted the statement. Now, we don't know whether it was a case of false allegations that Tank was a victim of, or whether it's true that she was attacked, and as a battered spouse, she's now afraid and retracting her statement because of that. As a result, we need due process and a fair hearing instead of bandwagoning in a witch hunt. Both Tank and his girlfriend deserve that process. Unfortunately, Tank hasn't always lived by the same sort of rules that I live by. He accused Ryan Garcia, of course, of drugs, cheating, and saying that's why he didn't want a tune-up prior to fighting him. And he had a bit to say about Conor Benn too and his drugs testing. So Conor Benn, having seen this news break, decided to have a little pop at Tank Davis on Twitter, and he said, "Don't throw stones if you live in a glass house, little man." Gervonta Davis responded by saying, "Get off them drugs and come and holler at me. I'll show you a glass house and a glass jaw, you bum." And Conor Benn said, "Them threats don't work here. Yawn, focus on staying out of prison." So these two started going back and forth, therefore, on Twitter, and a few people were saying, "I'd love to see this fight." And I basically said Conor Benn would absolutely ice Tank Davis. And I was stunned to see that I was in the minority of people that felt that Conor Benn would spark him out. I think there's too big of a gap physically in terms of size. Conor Benn is a puncher at 147 pounds. But the vast majority of people were saying, no way, Gervonta Davis destroys this guy, he sends him into outer space, and so on and so forth. How justifiable is it that Tank Davis would be a favourite against Conor Benn? I have to say, for me, there's a bit of deja vu going on here. This takes me back to the whole Canelo Alvarez debate. Prior to the Dimitri Bivol fight, a lot of people were saying he'd go up to cruiserweight and beat Makabu. And I was explaining, listen, Makabu's a puncher at cruiserweight and he's been in with heavy-handed guys at cruiserweight and he's taken their power. He may be a little bit crude, but there's a physical element to the fight game as well. It's not just about technical aspects. If he punches with Canelo at the same time as Canelo and he's going at the same time, he should be able to knock Canelo out. In fact, I don't even think Canelo's going to conquer light heavyweight. I think he's going to lose to Dimitri Bivol. And a lot of people were calling me a hater at the time and saying, what are you talking about? Canelo is an elite pound-for-pound level fighter. Makabu is far too crude. And I feel as though we're seeing that sort of thing happening again now. Yes, skill set matters, but so does physicality. And weight categories exist for a reason. And sometimes there's too big a jump. But I believe that people overlook that because they buy into a narrative, because a product is sold. And there's a majesty and a magic that is surrounded in certain products, certain superstars. They're almost seen like superheroes with superpowers. And when you have superpowers, you can overcome anything. And I think that's almost the narrative that a lot of people buy into without even realizing it. I want to give you guys a little analogy here. A lot of people will say, no, I don't buy into the narrative. I trust my own eyes and I trust my own ears. And even sometimes that can fall into the realm of being manipulated by the right marketing, so to speak. I want you to take a little look at this particular GOAT, and I just want you to listen to him. You're not going to understand where I'm going with this right now, but later on in the video, you will understand exactly where it is that I'm going with this. I just want you to hear the sound that this GOAT makes. Just remember that sound that you heard there, and we'll cover that later on in this video. Now, the best way I think to approach this, though, the wider question, is to look at it almost like a lawyer. For me to say to you guys, right, I'm going to be a defense lawyer. I will observe the arguments of the prosecution. In other words, the arguments that were put forth as to why Benn could not beat Tank Davis. And they came from two major perspectives. One of them was that Benn is just too limited to beat Tank. And the other one is that Tank is so special that it doesn't matter what Conor Benn would bring, he would knock him spark out anyway. So let's approach that. Let's start off with the idea that Conor Benn is not a puncher at 147. That was a common one that I was getting, and that he's had a manufactured path to the top of the sport. The thing is, the premise of that is that if you are an elite level fighter, you have a better chin than someone that is not elite level. In other words, for you to be a puncher, you have to knock out an elite level guy first. If Conor Benn was to fight, say, Errol Spence tomorrow and he was to knock him out, it wouldn't mean that he suddenly developed power. He simply would have proved that he has that power to you. But the power in his fist, the heavy-handedness, was already there. You see what I'm saying? So the question is, how do we really know? Well, you can look at the level of opponent that he has knocked out in terms of their durability. Chris Van Heerden is a very durable guy. This is a guy who's big at the weight, who has fought the likes of Errol Spence and lasted 8 rounds. He had a torrid first round against Jerome Boots Ennis, but he hadn't hit the canvas and it was stopped on an accidental headbutt. You know, he was a guy that was hanging in there. He was showing some real grit to be taking those licks. And apart from that, he hasn't been stopped. You look at a guy like Chris Algieri. He's fought a very heavy-handed guy in Ruslan Provodnikov, and he was able to survive an early knockdown and then go and win the fight on points. He's been the distance with Amir Khan, who wasn't feather-fisted himself. He did drop the likes of Marcos Maidana, right? He's been in there with Manny Pacquiao, and despite being flawed on multiple occasions, he went the distance with Manny Pacquiao. He too was stopped by Errol Spence in the 5th round. Conor Benn got him out in the 4th. So he has shown a level of being able to break down durable guys. Samuel Vargas, he got him out of there in 1 round. And a lot of people are pointing to Adrian Granados and they're saying, well, he couldn't get Granados out of there. This might be true, but you have to also understand that Granados has only also been stopped once himself, and he was running that whole fight. And I'm not somebody that uses the term running, because I believe that you should be allowed to use the entire ring. And if you're using the entire ring and boxing, then that's exactly what it is. It's boxing. It's not running. But to be boxing, you have to be showing some sort of attacking intent. He wasn't punching at all. It was reminiscent of Malik Scott and his performance against Luis Ortiz. Are you going to say that Luis Ortiz is incapable of knocking out Malik Scott, or that he doesn't have power at heavyweight because Malik Scott survived? No, because you are aware that Malik Scott was running without showing a willingness to engage. And that's the point there. So it's not a lack of power from Conor Benn with regards to Granados. So the point I'm making here is that these guys are durable dudes and he's decimating them. You know, there is something to be said about him not knocking guys out yet at elite level. And that's to do with the fact that an elite level guy can take away your opportunity to land a big shot. But if you land a big shot, it doesn't mean he's more likely to survive just because he's elite. Mariusz Vac is nowhere near the level of Vladimir Klitschko. But if you're going to land a flush right hand on Klitschko, which is much harder to do than it is against Vac, right? But if you're going to land that flush right hand on Klitschko, you're a lot more likely to knock him spark out with a single shot than you would Mariusz Vac with a single shot that you land on his jaw. So just because he hasn't fought elite level guys, it doesn't mean he's not showing the signs of having great power. Additionally, if your sole method of measuring power is what elite level guys he's knocked out, why do we consider the likes of Jerome Boots Ennis to be a big puncher too? His CV isn't too dissimilar from Conor Benn's. So all this stuff doesn't really count. Now, the other criticism we get of Conor Benn is that, yes, he does have power, but it's been artificially induced via performance-enhancing drugs. And if he discontinues those performance-enhancing drugs, he's going to essentially revert back to the guy that fought Peno. PEDs don't work like that. Let's say we assume that he's guilty for a moment and he's been taking PEDs for a period of time. We'll get to that in a second, actually, because even that is not as clear-cut. But let's say he's been taking it for years. If he's taking something like growth hormone, his body grows and it's changed irrevocably. He's not going to shrink to the point where he reverts back to that weaker guy. When Lionel Messi was a young man with a young teenager with growth issues, they gave him growth hormone and his body grew and he became bigger as a human being and he was capable of doing more athletically. He discontinued that. He didn't carry it throughout his whole life, but he benefited from that. He's not going to shrink back into being a 14-year-old kid. By the same token, Conor Benn is not going to shrink back to that 21-year-old who had yet to get man strength when he'd fought Peno. Now, we don't know when he started to take the PEDs. Let's say we assume he's guilty. Did he start to take them because he wanted to fight Chris Eubank, and prior to that he was clean and he just felt that he needed them to go up to middleweight, in which case all of his knockouts are legitimate? Did he start taking them over the past year when he stopped enrolling with the WBC program, like many people say? Well, that might mean that the Van Heerden and Algieri knockouts are looked down upon, invalid, so to speak, but the Samuel Vargas one came before that. Has he been doing it since 2019 to 2020, before he stepped up to fight Formella, like a lot of people claim, that year break? That's one of the rumours that goes around on the internet. Well, in his last 5 fights, so from Formella all the way up to Van Heerden, he's knocked out 3 of the 5 opponents. In the 5 fights previous to that, he'd also knocked out 3 of the 5 opponents. So the ratio is the same. He's just doing it against a high level of opposition, and maybe some people expected that to fall when he started to go through the quality levels rather than it staying stable. So some people see that as a sign of cheating, but not necessarily. Bud Crawford seems more destructive now than he was in the past. Has he been drugs cheating? You see, a lot of the times you grow as a man. He's grown into that man strength. His punching technique has improved massively. His boxing ability has improved massively, which is linked to the idea of setting a shot up, setting a knockout up. He's become a lot more effective at doing that. So all these things play a big role in how you deliver power too. So you can become a more efficient puncher as you go through age, as you go through experience, as you improve as a fighter. Bear in mind, this is not a guy that had an extensive amateur background. So he's going to be improving and learning new things on the job, perhaps at a greater rate than a guy who had a long amateur career and is already of an extremely high level when he turns pro. So this idea, regardless of where you stand on this issue with knockout power, why he has it, the fact is he has it. And even if it drops off 25%, if he was to discontinue taking what he's allegedly taken, he's not going to revert back to the guy that fought Peno, physically speaking. Which brings us on to Tank Davis. One of the comments I got on Twitter was, let's see how astute or stupid your opinion is on the following. Enlighten me. Who would Ben beat out of the following? Butayev, Stanionis, Ortiz, Ennis, Thurman, Bud, Spence and Ugas. Rather than segue into a debate about that, let me just explain why this point doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Even if Conor Benn loses to all of those guys, that's 8 welterweights. He would still be in the top 10 welterweights in the world. So rather than focusing on who Ben could beat at welterweight, let's ask ourselves if Tank Davis would be good enough to be a top 10 welterweight. Could he knock out the top 10 welterweights? You know, Tank is a wonderfully talented fighter. He's a natural 130 pounder. He's a small lightweight. And when you see Tank against smaller guys, he's capable of doing some wonderful things. You see him against Leo Santa Cruz, who's even smaller than Tank Davis, and that knockout was stunning. But look at the way he set it up. He walked down the smaller guy in Santa Cruz, pushed him back onto the ropes. In the meantime, he ate a jab, a clipping left hook, and then a very flush right hand, before another right hand missed, and then a third right hand was slipped with a devastating uppercut. You're not going to be eating a jab, a clipping left hook, and a flush right hand against Conor Benn and walking him down like that. You'll wake up 5 minutes later with stars. Forget stars. There'll be little heads of Leonard Ellaby just rotating around your forehead as you're lying on your back looking up to the sky. He ain't doing that with Conor Benn. Yuriokis Gamboa. 39 years old was he when they fought? Again, a naturally smaller man. He went 12 rounds against Gervonta Davis. He was stopped in the last round. Isaac Cruz, who is a natural lightweight and a dangerous one at that. He's very good at coming in low, leading with power shots, a real handful. He went the distance against Tank Davis and he was pushing Tank back. Now, a lot of people felt Isaac Cruz won that fight. I felt Tank legitimately won the fight on points, but it was close. It was a hard-earned win. This is a lightweight who's aggressive with him. If he's not pushing him back, what makes you think he's going to go and push Conor Benn back? Rolando Romero, very good knockout. Really nice timing, lured Romero into a shot. Despite the fact that Romero is a muscular dude, he's still a lightweight. He's a lot smaller than Conor Benn. His bone structure is smaller. Mario Barrios, that's a 140-pound guy. That's a good win in terms of a knockout, but he went 11 rounds, and even he's not rated in the top 30 by BoxRec. He's 34th in the world by BoxRec. So this idea that he's fighting these killers and he's going to be able to carry it up to welterweight, where is the evidence for it? A lot of people will say, well, the PBC and Floyd were only interested in making money. Well, they would have made a lot more money if he went and sparked out Lomachenko or Ryan Garcia or Devin Haney, and we haven't seen those fights. We're supposedly going to see them soon, but we haven't yet seen them. Why not? Is there something they know that perhaps you don't when it comes to the public narrative? You're talking to me about a guy who's 130 pound naturally, who still looks very dangerous at £135, but really is unproven at £135, if we're being real, who has knocked out a guy outside of the top 30 at 140, and you're talking to me about him going up another division to 147 and knocking out Conor Benn. Based on what? It's narrative, my friends. And when it comes to narrative, remember I played you that GOAT earlier on? You know, Adolf Hitler once said, let me control the textbooks and I will control the state. In other words, if you control the media, if you control the education system, then you can make the public believe anything you want them to believe. And if Tank Davis, who is no doubt very talented, is packaged in a way where he makes you think he's an immortal superhero, you can start to believe that he can achieve absolutely anything. Let's listen to that GOAT when you apply auto-tune to it. You understand? The difference between reality and what is narrative sometimes can be massive. Let me know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe you believe I'm talking rubbish. Maybe there are other arguments that you can put forward to make the claim that Gervonta Davis would be able to handle the power of Conor Benn. That Gervonta Davis is far too slick, that his power would certainly carry, and that he'd be able to take out Conor Benn, because maybe Conor Benn would revert back to being the guy that fought Pele. Maybe that's your position. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, ladies and gents. I wish each and every one of you a very happy new year. God bless you guys. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. And please share the video too if you enjoyed it and help the channel grow. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.